Ellery gripped the edge of the podium in the underground office, 40 stories below Seoul, and every executive in that glass room stood up at once. Chairs scraped. A man near the back set down his coffee like it might spill from the sound of his own heartbeat. 6 months ago, she was standing at an altar in a rented chapel in Georgia, watching her own sister walk toward her fiancé in a dress that was supposed to be hers. Nobody in that glass room knew that part. They only knew her as the woman who ran the city underneath their feet now. Before we dive in, are you watching this alone? Or is someone right there with you? And where are you tuning in from tonight? Drop your location in the comments. Welcome to Soul Root Stories. 6 months earlier, the church smelled like lilies and hot wax. Ellery stood in the back room in her dress, hands steady, breathing slow, the way she always breathed when things mattered. The room smelled like hairspray and hot iron, someone's steamer still running in the corner. Her mother fixed a pin in her hair without looking at her. "You look like her," Odessa said. "When she was young." "I look like me, Mom." Odessa didn't answer that. She never did. Marlo came in wearing a robe, holding a garment bag. She hung it on the closet door and didn't say anything about what was inside it. "You nervous?" Marlo asked. "No. You should be. Weddings change everything." Ellery caught her sister's eyes in the mirror. Something in them didn't match her voice. She let it go. She'd been letting things go with Marlo her whole life. The music started. Ellery walked the aisle on her father's arm. Callum stood at the front in his gray suit, jaw tight, eyes somewhere over her shoulder instead of on her face. She told herself it was nerves. The pastor got through 2 lines before Marlo stood up from the front pew. "I can't let this happen." The room went quiet in that specific way a room goes quiet right before it gets loud. "Ellery's been seeing someone," Marlo said, voice cracking on cue. "I have proof." I didn't want to say anything. I kept hoping it wasn't true. She held up her phone. A photo. Ellery and a man from her office, arms around each other at a birthday party 8 months back. Cropped tight. No context. "That's Marcus," Ellery said. "From accounting." It was Breyer's birthday. Nobody was listening to her. Alaric was already standing. Odessa had a hand over her mouth, like she'd rehearsed the gesture. Callum didn't look at Ellery at all. He looked at Marlo. "I need everyone to just," Ellery started. Nobody let her finish. Alaric was already moving toward the front pew, Odessa right behind him, both of them looking at Ellery like she was the one who'd done something wrong. Marlo crossed to the closet at the side of the altar, unzipped the garment bag, and pulled out a wedding dress. Her own, altered to fit her exactly. She stepped behind a folding screen someone had wheeled in for the flower arrangements, and came out in it 4 minutes later while 300 guests watched, half of them recording on their phones, none of them putting the phones down to ask a single question. An older woman in the third row stood up and said, "Is somebody going to explain what's happening?" Nobody answered her either. Callum took Marlo's hand. Nobody stopped it. The pastor, still holding his notes, looked between the 2 sisters like he was waiting for someone to tell him this was a joke, and when no one did, he simply stepped aside and let it happen, because that's what everyone in that room did. They let it happen. Ellery stood at the altar in the dress she picked out 11 months ago, in the church her grandmother helped pay for, and watched her sister marry her fiancé in front of everyone who was supposed to love her first. She didn't cry. Not there. She walked out the side door past the coat closet, past the little boy from the ring-bearer chair who was eating a mint and staring at her like she was a stranger, past Breyer, who grabbed her arm and got shoved off by a photographer trying to get a shot of the new couple. Outside, the parking lot was empty except for the limo. The driver didn't know what happened yet. He opened the door for her like it was still her wedding. "Just drive," Ellery said. "Where to?" "I don't care." He drove her around the block 4 times before she told him to take her home. Lenora was waiting on the porch when the limo pulled up. 81 years old, oxygen tank parked next to her rocking chair, still dressed like she'd been ready for church herself. She didn't ask what happened. She'd gotten a call from Breyer 20 minutes earlier. "Sit down," Lenora said. Ellery sat on the porch step, still in the dress, and put her head against her grandmother's knee the way she used to when she was 7, back when a skinned knee was the biggest thing that could go wrong in a day. Down the street, a neighbor's dog barked at nothing. Somewhere a lawn sprinkler kicked on. Ellery focused on those sounds instead of the ringing in her own ears. "I keep thinking if I'd just said something different at the altar." "You didn't do anything wrong today," Lenora said. "Not one thing." "You hear me. Then why does it feel like this? Because the people who were supposed to protect you decided not to. That's not the same as you failing. Don't you dare confuse the two. I'm going to tell you something, Lenora said, and I need you to actually hear it, because I don't have the years left to say it twice. Not now, Grandma. Now? Because now is when it matters. Ellery lifted her head. 40 years ago, I was in Korea with your grandfather, before he passed. There was a car accident. A young man pulled us both out before the car went up. I never forgot his face. His name was Taehyun Kong. I don't understand what that has to do with. He made me a promise that day. Family looks after family, however many years it takes. I made him one back. Lenora's hand tightened on Ellery's shoulder. His grandson is unmarried. Wheelchair-bound, from what I hear. Good man, by every account I've gathered. I want you on a plane to Seoul by the end of the month. You want me to marry a stranger. I want you somewhere Marlo can't reach you. Ellery looked down at her own hands, still holding a bouquet nobody had taken from her. Fine, she said. Fine. Send me. Lenora nodded once, like the matter was closed, and reached into her cardigan pocket for a sealed envelope she'd apparently been carrying around for longer than made sense. Don't open this yet, she said. You'll know when. The lawyer's office had a window unit rattling in the corner, too loud for the room. Dorian Whitlock slid a folder across the desk to Ellery 3 days later. Your grandmother set up a trust years ago. It activates the day you land in Seoul. It's not much, but it's yours, and nobody in your family can touch it. Why didn't she tell my parents about this? Because your parents would have told Marlo. Ellery signed where he pointed. Her hand didn't shake. Briar drove her to the airport 2 weeks later, gripping the wheel too hard the whole way, taking the long route without saying why, like slowing the drive down might slow everything else down too. You don't have to do this, Briar said. You could stay. Fight for what's yours. There's nothing left here to fight for. Marlo has the ring, the house, the fiancé, and both our parents' blessing. What exactly am I fighting for? Yourself. Your name. The fact that everyone in that church knows the truth and said nothing. They knew and still let her walk down the aisle in my dress, Briar. I don't need people like that to know the truth. I need to be somewhere they can't reach me. There's me. Ellery reached over and squeezed her hand off the wheel for a second. I know. I'll call you every week. I promise. Every week isn't the same as every day. It's what I've got. At the gate, Briar hugged her too long, the way people do when they're not sure it's not goodbye for Real, and pressed a folded photo into her palm before letting go. The two of them at 16, grinning outside a movie theater, nothing about their lives complicated yet. So you remember who you were before all this, Briar said. Ellery held onto the photo the entire walk to the gate and didn't put it away until she was seated on the plane. The flight was 14 hours. Ellery didn't sleep. She watched the little airplane icon crawl across the ocean on the seatback screen and thought about nothing, on purpose, the whole way. Jiho Park was waiting at Incheon with a sign that had her name spelled correctly, which she noticed because nobody in Korea had gotten that right on any of her documents yet. Mrs. Ashford? Ellery's fine. I'm Jiho. I work for the Kong family. Car's this way. The car was black, quiet, the kind of quiet that meant expensive. Jiho drove through Seoul at night, past signs in a language she couldn't read yet, past a city that didn't stop moving even at 11 p.m. Is he nice? Ellery asked. Min-jun. Jiho glanced at her in the mirror. He's fair. That's rarer than nice, in my experience. The Kong estate had a gate that took 30 seconds to open, tall stone walls on either side, security cameras mounted at angles that made it clear this wasn't just a wealthy family's house. Soo-jin was standing in the doorway when the car pulled up, arms crossed, already unhappy about something Ellery hadn't done yet. You're late, Soo-jin said, in English, sharp enough that Ellery understood it wasn't really about the time. The flight was delayed. Everything is always delayed with your family, I hear. Ellery didn't answer that. She'd learned that morning, on the plane, watching another passenger deal with a rude flight attendant, that silence sometimes did more work than a comeback. Soo-jin looked her over once, top to bottom, the way someone inspects a delivery they didn't order. You'll stay in the West Wing. Dinner is at 7. You will be on time for that, at least. I'll be there. See that you are. Soo-jin turned and walked back into the house without offering to help with the bags, without asking about the flight, without a single question about the woman who'd just flown 14 hours to marry into her family. Ji-ho carried the bags himself, apologizing quietly for Soo-jin without actually saying her name. She'll come around. Eventually. Maybe. You don't sound convinced. I've worked here 9 years. I've learned not to promise things about that woman. Min-jun was in the front room, wheelchair angled toward the door, hands folded in his lap. He didn't stand, obviously, but he didn't look away either, which was more than Callum had managed on their actual wedding day. You must be tired, he said. His English was careful, precise, like he'd practiced the sentence. I'm fine. You're not. But you don't have to pretend for me. That stopped her for a second. Nobody had said anything like that to her in weeks. Sung-ho, the family elder, came in from the hallway, took one look at Ellery, and said something in Korean to Soo-jin that made her flinch slightly. Ellery didn't need a translation to know it wasn't kind. Grandfather, Min-jun said, voice flat. She's standing right there. She doesn't understand Korean. That doesn't mean she can't tell what you're saying. Sung-ho left the room without apologizing. Min-jun looked at Ellery like he was checking for damage. I'm sorry about that. I've had worse days, Ellery said. This week, actually. That got something out of him. Not quite a laugh, but close. The first crack in the wall. The wedding happened 9 days later. No church. No 300 guests. Just a small hall with white flowers and Ji-ho standing witness on Min-jun's side, and nobody at all standing witness on hers, because she hadn't told her family where she'd gone. Min-jun wore a plain black suit. Ellery wore a dress she bought 2 days before, off the rack, nothing like the one Marlowe had stolen. She hadn't wanted anything close to it. No lace, no train, nothing that would remind her of that church. She stood at the front of the small hall and realized, with something close to relief, that there was no aisle to walk down this time, no audience to perform for, just a room with 4 people in it, and a stranger she was about to marry. They exchanged rings that weighed almost nothing. His hand was steady when he slid hers on. Hers wasn't, not quite, but he didn't say anything about it, just held her hand a second longer than the moment required. We don't have to pretend this is real, Min-jun said quietly, while the officiant finished paperwork nearby. I know why you're here. Do you? A debt. Old promises. I'm not offended. I've been the reason for a lot of arrangements in my life. What if I don't want to pretend either way? Ellery said. What if I just want to see what this actually is? He looked at her for a long moment, longer than the question probably needed. Then we'll see, he said. That night, in the guest wing that was now apparently her wing, Ellery sat on the edge of the bed and finally opened the envelope Lenora gave her. Inside was a photograph, old and creased. A young woman who looked exactly like her, standing next to a young man with a face she recognized from a portrait hanging in the estate's main hallway, Taehyun Kong, decades younger. On the back, in her grandmother's handwriting, debts of the heart aren't about money. Trust him. Ellery sat with that for a long time before she turned off the light. 3 weeks in, Ellery learned the house by its sounds. The kitchen staff came in at 5. Soo-jin's heels on the hallway floor meant a complaint was coming. Min-jun's wheelchair had a specific creak on the left wheel that told her exactly where he was in the house, without looking. She'd started mapping the place the way she used to map new apartments back home. Which floorboards gave her away, which doors stuck in the humidity, which rooms Soo-jin avoided, and which ones she guarded like they held something worth protecting. The east hallway was the one Soo-jin guarded hardest, though Ellery hadn't figured out why yet. She found Min-jun in the study most mornings, reading reports in Korean and English both, a stack of paper taller than made sense for a man with no real job, as far as she'd been told. He always had the same cup of tea going cold beside him, always forgot to drink it until it was too cold to bother. You're going to give yourself a headache reading in 2 languages before breakfast, she told him one morning. I've been doing it since I was 9. My head's used to it by now. Doesn't mean it's good for you. Neither is jet lag, and you've had that for 3 weeks straight. She didn't have a comeback for that one. What exactly do you do? She asked one morning, setting a cup of tea by his elbow without being asked. She'd noticed he liked it black, no sugar, same as her. Family investments. That's what people say when they don't want to answer the question. He looked up at her, something amused behind his eyes. You're direct. I got married in 9 days to a stranger on another continent. I don't have room left for polite. Fair, he said, and went back to his papers. But he was smiling slightly, and he didn't hide it from her. That evening, Jiho drove her into the city for groceries Soo-jin refused to have delivered. A small, deliberate cruelty, making the American girl run errands like staff. Ellery didn't complain. She liked the walk through the market anyway, liked picking through fruit stalls, liked that nobody there knew her name or her sister's name or anything about a wedding that fell apart on the other side of the world. She was reaching for oranges when a man in a dark suit bowed to her. Actually bowed, low, the kind of bow she'd seen people give to executives on the news. "Mrs. Kong," he said. "I'm sorry. Apologies. I mistook you." He backed away fast, too fast, like he'd said something he shouldn't have. A second man near the fish stall turned his head at the sound of the name, said something quick to the woman next to him, and both of them looked at Ellery a beat longer than strangers usually do. An older woman running the produce stall waved Ellery closer and pressed a bag of persimmons into her hands, refusing payment, bowing the same shallow bow the man in the suit had given her. "No, I have to pay you for these," Ellery said, holding out cash. The woman shook her head, said something fast in Korean, and pointed back toward the direction of the estate, like that explained everything there was to explain. Ellery stood there holding an orange in one hand and a bag of free persimmons in the other, turning the moment over. She was Mrs. Kong, legally, but something about the way the man said it, the way he bowed, the way a produce seller wouldn't take her money, none of it matched a nobody's wife. She asked Jiho about it in the car. "Some people know Min Jun by reputation," he said, eyes on the road, careful. "What reputation?" Soo-jin barely lets him leave the estate. Sung-ho treats him like he's an embarrassment. "That's the reputation people are meant to see." "Meant to." Jiho didn't answer. He turned the radio on instead. That night, Ellery couldn't sleep. She got up around 1 in the morning for water and passed the east hallway, the one Soo-jin always steered her away from. Always some excuse. "The floor's being redone. There's nothing back there. Don't bother." There was a service elevator at the end of it, half hidden behind a folding screen. She'd walked past it a dozen times without noticing. Tonight the screen was pushed aside, and a man in a gray uniform was swiping a card against a panel she hadn't seen before. Ellery stepped back into a doorway, out of the light, and watched. The doors opened. He stepped in. The doors closed. The number display above the elevator didn't count up. It counted down, past the ground floor, past a basement level. It kept going, past numbers that shouldn't have existed under a private residence, and stopped somewhere so far down the display, just read a flat line of zeros before going dark. She waited by the panel after the hallway went quiet again. Ran her thumb along the seam of the doors. No handle. No visible call button beyond the one card reader, its light blinking soft green in the dark. Footsteps came from the direction of the kitchen, and Ellery moved fast, back down the hallway, into her room, door shut, back against it, heart going harder than the situation probably called for. She stood there in her socks in the dark room for a full minute before she got back into bed. She didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning she found Min Jun in the study again. Same spot, same tea already cold beside him because he'd forgotten it, same as most days now. "There's an elevator in the east hallway," she said. No preamble. "It goes down past the basement." He set his pen down slowly. "You weren't supposed to see that." "I wasn't trying to. I just did." He studied her for a long moment, the kind of look that felt like he was deciding something bigger than the conversation they were having. "Sit down," he said. She sat. "There are things about this family you don't know yet. Things I haven't told you because I wasn't sure I could trust you with them. That's not about you. That's about every person who's tried to get close to me for what's underneath this house instead of what's actually in it." "I'm not asking for underneath," Ellery said. "I'm asking you to stop treating me like I'm furniture in your own home." Something in his face shifted, not anger, something closer to respect. "Give me time," he said. "I'll show you. I promise you that. Just not yet." "Why not yet?" "Because the last time I trusted someone with this too fast, it cost me people I loved." Ellery didn't push further. She recognized the shape of that sentence. She'd been carrying one just like it since the day her sister put on a stolen dress in front of 300 people. "Okay," she said. "Take your time." She stood to leave, and at the door she stopped, hand on the frame, the same way he'd looked at her in the market, like there was something worth saying that hadn't been said yet. "For what it's worth," she said, "I didn't marry you for whatever's down there. I didn't even know it existed until last night. I know, Min-jun said quietly. That's exactly why I'm going to show you. 2 nights later, Min-jun wheeled himself to her door after Soo-jin and Sung-ho had gone to bed. Ji-ho stood behind him, holding a set of keys Ellery hadn't seen before. Get dressed, Min-jun said. Something warm. It's cold down there. They took the service elevator. Ji-ho swiped the card. The doors closed, and the numbers started counting down, past ground, past basement, past sub-basement, into numbers that didn't have names, just digits. Ellery watched the display, then watched Min-jun, who sat perfectly still in the chair, hands folded, none of the nervousness she felt showing anywhere on his face. You've done this 1,000 times, she said. Almost every day for 4 years. It still feels strange bringing someone else down for the first time. Why me? Why now? Because you asked me a direct question and didn't flinch when I didn't answer it right away. Most people either stop asking or start pretending they already know. The elevator slowed. A soft chime. The doors opened onto a street. Not a hallway. Not a bunker. An actual street, wide and lit, storefronts on either side. People walking with bags and briefcases like it was any city block anywhere in the world. Except there was no sky. Just a ceiling built to look like one, stars mapped out in small lights, so far up it took Ellery a second to realize they weren't real. What is this place? She said. My grandfather built it. 40 years ago, starting with 3 rooms and a generator. Now it's a city. Banks. Businesses. Almost 1,200 people live and work down here, most of them by choice, some of them born into it. A woman walked past and bowed to Min-jun, deep and immediate. He nodded back, easy, familiar, like this happened every day, because it did. A group of teenagers ran past chasing a soccer ball, and one of them looked up, recognized Min-jun, and yelled something that made him laugh. A real laugh, loose and unguarded, nothing like the careful smiles he gave in the study upstairs. What did he say? Ellery asked. He asked if I was finally going to fix the lighting on 4th Street. Kids have been complaining about it for a year. Are you going to fix it? Tomorrow, probably. Now that you've made me feel guilty about it in front of a 12-year-old. They don't treat you like you're sidelined down here, Ellery said. No. Up there, in the house, I let them believe what they want to believe. Down here is where I actually am. Hyun-woo Choi met them at the end of the block, tall, sharp-suited, a folder already tucked under his arm like he'd been expecting them. He didn't bow so much as nod with real weight behind it. Chairman, Hyun-woo said. Chairman, Ellery repeated. Hyun-woo glanced at Min-jun, uncertain whether to keep talking business in front of her, and Min-jun gave him a small nod that answered the question. There's paperwork, Min-jun said, almost sheepish. Grandfather's title. I inherited it 4 years ago. Nobody upstairs knows. It's easier that way. Easier for the family, or easier for you? Both, if I'm honest. Up there I'm the son who got hurt and never fully recovered. Down here, I'm the only person who's kept this place standing for 4 years without losing a single business to bad decisions. I like being that person better. Easier for who? For me to find out who actually cares about me and who's counting on inheriting something. Ellery looked at the wheelchair, then at him, and something clicked into place that had been bothering her since the airport. The chair, she said. Is it even real? He didn't answer right away. Jin Yoon, a woman in a sharp navy suit, arrived with a tablet and started talking numbers before Ellery got her answer. Some report about the East District banks, and Min-jun handled it fast and clean, decisions coming out of him in a voice she hadn't heard him use upstairs, certain, unhesitating, nothing like the careful, guarded man in the study. When Jin left, Ellery asked again. Was what? The injury was real. Car accident. 4 years ago, same year I took the title. I couldn't walk for 8 months. I can now. He said it plainly. No shame in it. No performance either. I kept the chair after I recovered. People show you who they are when they think you can't get up and fight them for it. That's manipulative. Maybe. It's also the only way I've found to know who's actually in the room for me and who's in the room for what I can give them. My own cousin stopped visiting the week I got hurt and started visiting again the week the doctor said I'd walk. I noticed that. I don't forget things like that. And what did I show you? That you never once looked at me like I was less because of it. Not on the first day. Not since. Ellery sat down on a bench near a small fountain, the fake stars glowing overhead, the whole underground city moving around them like nothing strange was happening at all. You could have told me, she said. Before tonight. I could have. I didn't trust it yet. Do you now? He wheeled closer, close enough that their knees almost touched. I trust you more than I've trusted anyone in 4 years, he said. I don't know what to do with that yet. I'm still figuring it out. Ellery reached over and put her hand over his on the armrest of the chair, and he didn't pull away, and neither did she. Take your time, she said, echoing his own words back at him. I'm not going anywhere. Something passed between them that neither one said out loud, but both of them felt it land. If this story's already got you hooked, hit like, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to Seoul Root Stories so you don't miss what happens next. Back on the surface, 7,000 miles away, Marlo was standing in a lawyer's office of her own, and the news she was about to hear was going to end her marriage before it even finished its first year. 2 months into the marriage, Marlo noticed Callum stopped introducing her by name at dinners. He'd say, "My wife," and let people fill in the rest. Let them assume things about Korean holding companies and family money that he never once corrected. She let it slide the first few times. It got them a better table at restaurants. It got him meetings he wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Then Reginald Voss called her directly instead of Callum and asked her to come in alone. Marlo sat across from him, an investor who'd put $400,000 into Callum's startup 2 months after the wedding, based entirely on a rumor Callum never bothered to correct, that his new wife's family had ties to a Korean conglomerate. I looked into it, Voss said, sliding a folder across the table. There's no connection. Not to the Kong family. Not to any Korean holding company. Your husband told my partners something that isn't true, and I want my money back before this gets ugly. There has to be a mistake, Marlo said. My sister married into that family. Your sister, Voss repeated. Not your husband. Not you. Marlo drove home with her hands too tight on the wheel, the same way Breyer used to grip a wheel when she was scared, except Marlo wasn't scared yet. She was still angry, still sure this was fixable, still sure charm would get her through it the way it always had. Callum was in the kitchen when she got home, on the phone, voice low and urgent in a way she recognized from the weeks before the wedding, when he used to talk to Marlo like that behind Ellery's back. I'll get it fixed, he was saying. Give me 2 weeks. He hung up when he saw her. Who was that? Nobody. Business. Voss says you told his partners were connected to the Kangs. Callum's jaw worked for a second before he answered. I might have implied something. You lied to get investors. I didn't lie. I just didn't correct an assumption. That's still lying, Callum. He crossed the kitchen fast, closer than she liked, voice dropping. You think I married you for your personality? You think any of this works if people don't believe there's money behind you? Marlo stood there in her own kitchen and heard, for the first time, exactly what she was to him. Not a wife. A rumor he could spend. Get out, she said. This is my house. It's my father's house. Get out. He left that night with 2 suitcases and didn't look back at her once. Halfway down the driveway he stopped, came back, and grabbed a box of cufflinks off the entry table without a word, like the conversation they'd just had hadn't happened at all. Marlo stood in the doorway long after his car pulled away, replaying the wedding in her head. The dress, the altar, the sister she'd humiliated in front of 300 people for a man who saw her as a business opportunity with a pulse. Her phone lit up twice that night with texts from people she'd invited to the wedding, asking if the rumors about Callum's company were true. She didn't answer either one. She called Odessa first. Her mother didn't pick up. She called the house line instead. Alaric answered. Dad, it's me. I need to talk to Mom. She's not taking calls right now, Marlo. Why not? Dad, what's going on? First Callum. Now this. Is everyone in this family keeping secrets from me at once? Marlo. I just found out my husband married me for a rumor. I don't have the patience for more mystery tonight. There was a long pause, the kind that meant something was coming. She's been going through your grandmother's old papers, Alaric said. There's things in there we didn't know. About you and Ellery. About the hospital. What things? I think you should come home. Marlo drove to her parents' house that night, the same house she grew up in, the same porch where Lenora used to sit with her oxygen tank, empty now, because Lenora had died 6 weeks after Ellery flew to Seoul, quietly, in her sleep, the day after mailing one final letter to her lawyer that nobody had opened yet. Odessa was sitting at the kitchen table with a folder spread out in front of her, the same kind of folder Dorian Whitlock kept his important papers in. Mom. Odessa looked up, and her face had the specific exhaustion of someone who'd been crying for hours and had run out of tears to do it with. "Sit down," Odessa said. "I need to tell you something I should have told both of you a long time ago." Marlo sat. "When you two were born, there was a complication. You came second by 11 minutes. Ellery was first. So your grandmother's trust, her real trust, not the small one she gave Ellery before the wedding, was set up years before either of you were born. Whoever came first would inherit control of the family's assets when she passed. Not split, not shared. Whoever came first." Marlo felt her chest go tight in a way that had nothing to do with sadness. "That doesn't sound like something you could get away with. Hospitals don't just let you switch records because you ask nicely. Your grandmother's cousin was the head nurse on that floor. It wasn't hard. It was wrong, but it wasn't hard. So this whole time, I switched the birth certificates," Odessa said, voice flat now, like she'd rehearsed saying it out loud and had run out of ways to soften it. "I told the hospital there'd been an error. I said you were older. I thought the responsibility would crush you, and Ellery was always stronger, always steadier, and I thought I was protecting you by giving you the birthright instead of the burden. You didn't ask either of us what we wanted. You were 11 minutes old, Marlo. There was no asking. There was asking later. There were 30 years of later, and you never said a word. You gave me nothing," Marlo said quietly. "You gave me a lie I built my whole life on." "I know. Does Ellery know?" Odessa shook her head. "Not yet. But your grandmother knew. She knew before she died. That's why she sent Ellery to Korea. She wasn't protecting Ellery from you, Marlo. She was protecting the truth until she was ready to let it out." Marlo sat in the kitchen where she'd eaten 1,000 childhood dinners and understood, in one long silent minute, that the entire architecture of her life, the favoritism, the confidence, the belief that she was owed the best of everything, had been built on a lie her own mother told to save her from a weight she was never actually meant to carry. "I need to see the letter," Marlo said. "The one Grandma sent before she died." Odessa slid it across the table, still sealed. Marlo's hands weren't steady when she opened it. The letter was 3 pages, Lenora's handwriting shakier than Marlo remembered it, like it had been written in pieces over several sittings. "I loved you both the same. I want that understood before anything else in this letter. But love doesn't undo what's owed, and what's owed to Ellery has been owed since the day you were both born. I'm not writing to punish you, Marlo. I'm writing because a family lawyer will read this after I'm gone whether you want him to or not, and I'd rather you hear it from me first." Marlo read the rest standing up, the paper shaking slightly, and by the time she reached the end, she understood 2 things clearly. The trust, the real one, the one worth fighting a war over, was already in motion toward Dorian Whitlock's office, and there was a second letter, sealed separately, addressed directly to Ellery, that Lenora had instructed be delivered only after the truth came out. "Where's the second letter?" Marlo asked. "Dorian has it. He's sending it to Korea this week." Marlo sat back down slowly. "I have to fix this," she said, mostly to herself. "You can't fix a lie by telling a bigger one," Odessa said. "I learned that the hard way. Don't make my mistake." Marlo didn't answer. She was already thinking about Seoul. She sat with the letter another hour after Odessa went to bed, reading it twice more, and by the second read the anger had burned down into something quieter and harder to name. Not quite grief, not quite shame, something that sat in her chest like a stone she couldn't put down. She didn't book a flight that night. She wasn't ready yet. But she folded the letter carefully and put it in her bag instead of leaving it on the table, and that, for Marlo, was as close to a decision as she'd made in weeks. Meanwhile, 7,000 miles away, Ellery's days had a rhythm now that felt less like survival and more like a life. She spent mornings in the study with Min Jun, afternoons learning the underground markets from Jiho, and evenings on the rooftop terrace above the estate, where Min Jun had started joining her without being asked. "You're smiling," he said one evening, catching her off guard on the terrace. "Am I? You didn't do that the first month you were here." "I didn't have much reason to." "Do you now?" She looked at him, the city lights of actual Seoul spread out below them, real stars finally, not the fake ones underground. "Yeah," she said. "I think I do." He reached over and took her hand. No ceremony to it. No big declaration. Just his hand closing over hers on the stone railing, and she let it stay there. Some nights they didn't talk much at all. Just sat with the city noise below them, his hand loose around hers, the kind of quiet that didn't need filling. My father used to say silence was wasted time. Ellery said one of those nights. Said if you're not talking, you're not building anything. My grandfather said the opposite. Said the loudest people in a room usually have the least worth listening to. Sounds like our fathers would have hated each other. Probably. I like your version better anyway. Hygiene found them like that the next morning in the study, and instead of looking away politely, she set her tablet down and looked directly at Ellery. The East District workers want to meet you, Hygiene said. They've been asking. Me? What? Because you've been down there 4 times this month asking questions instead of giving orders. That's new for people like us. Ellery went. She spent 3 hours in a district she'd only seen in passing before, sitting with shop owners and factory workers on plastic stools outside a noodle shop, asking what they needed instead of what they thought she wanted to hear. An older man running a hardware stall told her, through Hygiene translating, that the district's water pressure had been low for 6 months and nobody from the main office had ever come down to check it themselves. I'll look into it personally, Ellery said. Not through a report. I'll come back and check it myself. They all say that, the man said. I know. I'm going to come back anyway. She did come back, for days later, unannounced, and stood in the man's shop while a technician checked the pipes, and by the end of that visit the man was calling her by name without being prompted. By the end of the month, Hyun-woo Choi, who'd been skeptical of her since the first day, pulled Min-jun aside without knowing Ellery could hear every word through the thin office wall. She's not what I expected, Hyun-woo said. No, Min-jun said. She's better. That night, back on the terrace, Min-jun stood up from his chair. He'd done it before, privately, when he thought no one was watching. He hadn't done it in front of her. He crossed the terrace on his own legs, slow, deliberate, and sat down next to her on the bench instead of staying in the chair across from it. I wanted you to see me stand, he said. Not because I was hiding it. Because I wanted the first time you saw it to mean something. Ellery didn't say anything right away. She reached up and put her hand against the side of his face instead, and he leaned into it. And the kiss that followed wasn't rushed or staged or performed for anyone. It was just the two of them, on a rooftop, 6 months after a wedding that fell apart on the other side of the world, finally landing in a place that felt like the truth. I wasn't supposed to fall in love with you, Ellery said quietly, forehead against his. Neither was I, Min-jun said. I think that's exactly why it worked. Below them, the real city kept moving, cars and neon and the ordinary noise of a Tuesday night, none of it aware that 2 people on a rooftop had just quietly changed the shape of their own lives. If you're feeling this story, make sure to like this video, drop a comment letting us know what you think happens next, and subscribe to Seoul Roots Stories so you catch the next chapter the moment it drops. 3 days later, a courier arrived at the Kong estate carrying a sealed envelope addressed to Ellery in her grandmother's handwriting, postmarked from a law office in Georgia, and Sujin signed for it without knowing it was about to change everything the family thought they understood about the woman living under their roof. Ellery opened the envelope in the study, Min-jun across from her, Ji-ho standing near the door because Dorian had called ahead and asked him to make sure she wasn't alone when she read it. The letter was shorter than the one Marlowe received. Lenora hadn't wasted words on her. You were born first, 11 minutes before your sister. Your mother switched the records because she thought she was protecting Marlowe from a weight she couldn't carry. She was wrong to do it, and she knows that now. The trust, everything I built, everything your grandfather and I worked for, was always meant for whoever came first. That's you. It's been you since the day you were born. I sent you to Korea not to punish you and not just to repay an old debt. I sent you because I needed you somewhere safe while the truth found its way out, and because I believed, I still believe, that the Kong family would show you who you really are faster than your own family ever did. I love you. I'm sorry it took me this long to say all of it. Ellery set the letter down on the desk and sat very still for a long moment. I'm not who I thought I was, she said. You're exactly who you've always been, Min-jun said. This letter didn't change that. It just told you the truth about where you came from. My mother lied to me my whole life. Your grandmother didn't. Ellery looked at him, and something about the steadiness in his face, the same steadiness that had been there since the first night she met him in that front room, wheelchair angled toward the door, settled something in her chest that had been unsteady for 6 months. I need to call my mother, she said. The call lasted 11 minutes. Odessa cried through most of it. Ellery didn't cry at all, not because she didn't feel it, but because she'd used up that particular grief already, standing in a parking lot in a wedding dress 6 months earlier, and she wasn't going to spend it twice on the same wound. "I'm not coming home," Ellery told her. "Not yet. Maybe not for a while. I understand. I don't forgive you. Not today. Maybe someday. Not today." "That's fair," Odessa said, voice breaking. "That's more than fair." 3 days after that call, Marlo showed up at the Kong estate gate without warning. Having flown 14 hours on a ticket she couldn't really afford anymore, and told the guard she was Ellery's sister and needed to speak with the family. Sung-ho let her in, mostly out of curiosity, and Marlo walked into the same front room Ellery had first stood in months earlier, except this time it was Marlo standing there, small and tired-looking, without the polish she usually carried like armor. Her coat was wrinkled from the flight. She hadn't slept, and it showed in the way she kept touching her own hair like she couldn't stop fidgeting. Ellery came down the hallway and stopped in the doorway when she saw her, one hand on the frame, not moving closer. "You look terrible," Ellery said. "I feel terrible." "Good. I need to talk to you," Marlo said when Ellery came in. "You flew 14 hours for a conversation you could have had on the phone." "I flew 14 hours because some things need to be said in person." Ellery didn't offer her a seat. Marlo stood there in the middle of the room, aware of it, and pushed forward anyway. "I know about the birth records," Marlo said. "I know everything. Mom told me before your letter even arrived. And I came to say I'm sorry. Not because I have to, because I actually mean it, for the first time in maybe my whole life. You married my fiancé in my dress in front of everyone I know. I know what I did. You let our parents believe I was the one who ruined the wedding. I know. So what exactly are you sorry for, Marlo? Say it. All of it. Out loud." Marlo's voice shook, but she didn't stop. "I'm sorry I stole your wedding. I'm sorry I lied about you to Mom and Dad. I'm sorry I let Callum use both of us to chase money that was never real. I'm sorry I spent my whole life needing to be first because some part of me always knew, underneath everything, that I wasn't." Min-jun wheeled in from the hallway, close enough to hear the last of it, and Ellery felt his presence beside her without needing to look. "I'm not going to pretend that fixes anything," Ellery said. "I'm not asking you to. You showed up here without calling. You always do this. Show up, say the right words, expect the room to reset because you finally said sorry out loud. I know how it looks. Do you? Because from where I'm standing it looks exactly like the girl who's been doing this our whole lives. Sorry, then forgiven, then right back to taking whatever she wants." Marlo didn't flinch from that. "Then don't forgive me. I didn't fly 14 hours for forgiveness. I flew here because I needed you to hear it from my mouth instead of a letter, even if you never say it's okay. Even if you never speak to me again after today. What are you asking for?" Marlo looked at her twin sister for a long moment. In a room 7,000 miles from the church where everything broke. "A chance," she said. "Not today. Not this year, maybe. Just don't close the door all the way." Ellery thought about Lenora's letter, about debts of the heart not being about money, about a man who tested every person in his life from a wheelchair because trust had to be earned honestly or it wasn't worth having at all. "The door's open a crack," Ellery said. "That's all I've got right now." Marlo nodded, like that was more than she expected, and it probably was. She left the next morning without asking for anything else, and 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived at the estate carrying something none of them expected, a formal notice from the Kong family's founding council, calling for a citywide vote on the empire's next guardian, the current chairman's succession being, by written charter, a matter the people underground had to decide for themselves. Sung-ho called a family meeting the night the notice arrived. The whole house gathered in the main hall for the first time since the wedding. "The charter is clear," Sung-ho said, reading from a document older than Min-jun. "Leadership of this house cannot pass by blood alone. When a chairman marries, the people below must decide if the marriage strengthens the house or weakens it. They vote. Their word is final." "That's archaic," Sujin said. "That's the reason this family has survived for 60 years, Sung-ho said. "You don't get to like the rule. You only get to follow it." Min-jun didn't look worried. He looked at Ellery instead, steady, the same look he'd given her the first night in the front room. "They already know you," he said. "Better than they know most people who've lived here their whole lives. What if it's not enough? Then we'll find out together. The vote was held 3 days later. In the underground square, the fake stars lit up overhead like the whole city was holding its breath along with her. Hundreds of residents gathered, shop owners, bankers, factory workers, the produce seller from the market who'd once refused Ellery's money for a bag of persimmons, Hygiene, Hyunwoo, Jiho standing near the front with his arms crossed like he already knew the outcome. Ellery stood at the edge of the square in a plain black coat, no jewelry, nothing that read like a performance, and watched the crowd fill in row by row until there wasn't standing room left near the fountain. Hyunwoo stood to address the crowd first. Some of you know this woman as the chairman's wife. I want you to know her as I've come to know her these past months. She sat in the East District for 3 hours listening to people the last 5 executives never bothered to visit. She didn't ask what she was owed. She asked what was needed. A murmur ran through the crowd, not hostile, something closer to agreement. A younger man near the front, a shop owner Ellery recognized from her second week in the market, the one who'd taught her the word for thank you in Korean without being asked, raised his hand and spoke without waiting to be called on. She learned our language in 4 months, he said. Not because someone told her to, because she wanted to understand us without a translator standing between us. Someone near the back added something in Korean that got a ripple of laughter, and Jiho leaned toward Ellery to translate. He says you argued with a fish vendor over pricing in Korean last week and won. I did win that, Ellery said, and a few people close enough to hear it laughed again, and something in the tension of the square eased slightly. Sung-ho stepped forward last, and the square went quiet fast, out of old habit more than agreement. He read the charter's final clause aloud, voice carrying across the square, no warmth in it, just the weight of tradition doing what tradition does. The people will now cast their voice. Not for wealth, not for blood, for trust, and for trust alone. The vote was counted by hand. Ballot after ballot dropped into a wooden box that looked as old as the city itself. 5 elders sat at a long table near the fountain, sorting slips into stacks, and Ellery watched the stacks grow uneven within the first 10 minutes, though she couldn't tell yet which side was winning. Minjun stood beside her, hand resting light against her lower back, saying nothing, watching the same stack she was. You don't seem nervous, Ellery said quietly. I am. I'm just better at hiding it than you. I'm not hiding anything. I just don't have room left to panic. I used it all up in a parking lot in Georgia. He almost laughed at that, caught himself, kept his face steady for the crowd. The counting took almost an hour while Ellery stood beside him and didn't move, didn't speak beyond that, just breathed slow the way she always breathed when things mattered. Hyunwoo read the final count from a slip of paper, and his voice cracked slightly on the number, because it wasn't close. The city had chosen her. Not narrowly, not by a technicality. Overwhelmingly, without hesitation, 1,200 people who'd watched her for months deciding, together, that she belonged. The square erupted, not with noise exactly, but with something warmer, applause, a few cheers, Jiho actually smiling for the first time Ellery had ever seen. Soo-jin, standing near the back, didn't clap, but she didn't leave either, and for Soo-jin that was close enough to acceptance. People started approaching after the count was announced, one at a time at first, then in a loose crowd. The shop owner who'd spoken up, the produce seller, workers from the East District she recognized by name now, each one saying some version of the same thing. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for treating this place like it mattered. Ellery shook hands until her arm ached, said thank you more times than she could count, and didn't fully feel the weight of what had happened until the square started to empty out, and it was just her, Minjun, and Jiho left near the fountain. Minjun took Ellery's hand in front of the last few stragglers still lingering. They chose you, he said. They chose us. No, he said. They chose you. I just got lucky enough to be standing next to you when they did. Jiho cleared his throat from a few feet away, trying and failing to look like he wasn't watching the two of them with a grin he couldn't quite suppress. I'll handle the paperwork tonight, Jiho said. Go celebrate. Both of you. That's an order, and I don't usually get to give you those. That night, on the terrace above the estate, real stars overhead this time, Ellery thought about the wedding dress her sister stole, about the parking lot, about Lenora's porch and the oxygen tank and the envelope she'd carried across an ocean without knowing what was inside it. She thought about the woman she used to be, the one who let things go, The one who stayed quiet. The one who walked out a side door because nobody stopped her sister from taking everything. That woman didn't exist anymore. Not because of a title. Not because of an empire underground or a vote in a fake starred square. Because somewhere along the way, in a house that didn't want her, married to a man in a wheelchair that wasn't even real anymore, she'd stopped waiting for people to choose her and started becoming someone worth choosing. Minjun found her there an hour later. Having finished the last of the paperwork, Sung-ho insisted on that same night. Formalities that couldn't wait even for a celebration. He sat down next to her on the bench without the chair this time, legs steady, no performance to it anymore. Just a man sitting down next to the woman he'd married by arrangement and stayed with by choice. Sung-ho signed the transfer papers an hour ago, he said. No objection, not even a comment. He just signed and left the room. That surprises you. Nothing about tonight surprises me anymore. He looked over at her. Except maybe how calm you are. I'm not calm. I'm just done performing panic for people. I did enough of that in a parking lot once. I need to ask you something, he said, and I need you to actually think about it before you answer. Okay, everything down there, the city, the charter, the title, none of it means anything to me without you in it. I know we started this as an arrangement. I know your grandmother built the frame before either of us ever agreed to step inside it. But I'm asking you now, as myself, not as a debt anyone owes anyone else. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box, plain, no ceremony to it, same as the first time he'd taken her hand. Marry me again, he said. For real this time. Not because two old friends made a promise 40 years ago. Because I choose you. Because 1,200 people down there chose you. Because I don't want to spend one more day pretending this started as anything less than what it actually became. Ellery looked at the box, at his face, at the city lights of Seoul spread out below them, and thought about how 6 months ago she'd stood in a parking lot in a wedding dress with nowhere left to go. She opened her mouth to answer. That's when the terrace door slammed open behind them, and Jiho came through it at a dead run, phone in his hand, face white in a way Ellery had never seen on him before. Chairman, Jiho said, breathless. You need to see this. Now. It's Sung-ho. He's not who we thought he was, and he's already moved against the council. If this story had you holding your breath, don't stop here. Like this video, drop a comment telling us what you think happens next, and subscribe to Seoul Roots Stories, because Ellery's story is far from over.